So hello and welcome to Cherry Bekaert's podcast series for private equity, where we will be discussing challenges and opportunities in the ever-changing investment environment. This is the first of a three-part series attributable to the marine industry and the boating industry. Our guest today will be David G., who is the executive editor of the boating industry. And so for more than 75 years, all those serious about the business of boating have turned to Boating Industry Magazine, which is one of the most authoritative voices of the marine market for strategic analysis, in-depth coverage, and proprietary research of the day's most critical issues. My name is Ron Wainwright. I'm a partner with Cherry Bekaert and our national leader of credits and accounting methods. So what we'd like to do in the first stage is to talk about what is happening in the marine industry when we think about merger and acquisition activity. So David, a number of questions. What, in your assessment, is the state of the M&A world in the marine industry, specifically as we focus on private equity groups?
Well, thanks for having me, Ron. And I appreciate that intro. Just to kind of set the stage, give you a little idea of the flurry of activity in just the past couple of years in the recreational boating industry. Malibu bought Pursuit and Cobalt. Mastercraft bought a pontoon company in Nautic Star, a bay boat company. Correct Craft acquired a company. Polaris, the snowmobile manufacturer, bought a boat holding company, which included 4 brands. Winnebago, the RV manufacturer, purchased Chris-Craft. BRP, another power sports company, acquired Alumacraft, a fishing boat company. They formed a marine group, and Brunswick bought a power products company, and there are some others. So there's been quite a flurry of activity. Nothing in the past couple of months to detail, but as I talk to these CEOs, and as we'll find out a little later in the podcast, they're always looking. So every CEO I talk to in the recreational boating industry, and I wouldn't necessarily be the first to know if a deal was percolating. I might, in fact, be the last to know as a media editor. But they're certainly always on the lookout, and I think there could be some opportunities coming up, especially depending on which way the economy goes here in the next year or so.
So, David, what in your assessment has caused this uptick in M&A activity? And some of the examples you mentioned we know are private equity driven. So Can you speak to kind of what's caused this uptick?
Yeah, well, let me talk a little bit. I think it would be helpful to detail a couple of these deals that I mentioned, go a little bit more beneath the surface. One is likely going to make perfect sense to listeners. The other, not so much. Maybe on the surface, we're still trying to make sense of that. But let's take Mastercraft. So company started back in 1968. They were the first, or one of the first, to put a V8 car motor in the middle of a boat with an inboard setup, optimized water skiing. So about 10 or 12 years ago, wakeboarding became the big thing. Mastercraft moved into that area. Then around 2015 or so, wake surfing became the big thing. They went there as well. Highly specialized water sports activities, but all ostensibly the same general type of boat. The boats run anywhere from $80,000 to $200,000, so not inexpensive for a specific purpose-built type boat. And if the economy tanks, the discretionary purchase of boats like that might as well. So they have some cash. What would they want to do, right? Diversify their product line. So they buy an established pontoon boat company, different segment of the recreational boating industry. They have their own dealer network, their own manufacturing facility, and a completely different type of boat, different demographics, different price point. So conceivably, if one segment of the boating industry tanks, another might still be doing fairly well. So that's the thinking with the majority of these acquisitions. It's simply diversifying a product line. Now, let's look at another deal, kind of an outlier. Winnebago Industries, arguably the best-known recreational vehicle brand in the U.S. What do? They buy another iconic brand, a boat brand, Chris-Craft. It's been around for decades, 100 years. Even if people don't have a clue about boating, they've likely heard about Chris-Craft. So what was Winnebago thinking? Well, there are just 3 RV manufacturers, which Winnebago is one, who have 92% of the RV market. So not much to buy there, right? And there might even be antitrust concerns because of their market share. So instead, they look to the boat segment. And they said, well, you know what? It's highly cyclical, but it does have some growth attributes. It's a highly fragmented market, and we might be able to make some dollars there. They also see a significant intersection between the RV and marine lifestyles, similar customer demographics, some crossover of the ownership. So then now they have a broader, more balanced portfolio of products positioned across an entire lifestyle and leisure industry, and they expect to drive improved profitability and shareholder value. We'll see about that. Now, more specifically, in the majority of these acquisitions, they're public companies, right? It's not unusual for public companies to have a leg of their growth be acquisitions. That could vary in volume, has to be balanced with organic growth, but it's all a function of a strategic plan. And as one of the CEOs told me, he said they're not necessarily buying earnings because Wall Street doesn't give you any long-term multiple for that, no reward. So it has to be part of a larger strategy that can be executed by the acquirer. And it's likely that most public companies across any sector likely have some business development executive working to constantly evaluate the market for key acquisitions. So they think that they can improve processes, improve quality, cycle time, make changes to the sourcing, the supply chain, add engineering and marketing resources, and make a buck. And that's really what it's all about.
So when we go back to the uptick in the M&A activity and kind of the phenomenon, as I would say, that's occurring, is this really U.S. or is it more a global trend?
Well, it's really U.S. Since the vast majority of recreational boat builders are based in the U.S., it's really not a global trend. There are a couple of recreational boat builders in Australia and New Zealand, some in Europe, but if you go boating in Europe, it's likely in an American-made boat. The same down under, the same true in Asia. In fact, the National Marine Manufacturers Association, the largest recreational boat building trade association, works actively to help their members export boats. So it's really kind of an American phenomenon. Part of what's driving it, there's still lots of older founder-based businesses in the industry. As I said, the industry as a whole is very fragmented. And those companies don't want to go through the next downturn. When the big downturn happened in 2007, 2008, it pretty much halved the marine industry, cut it in half, and it really hasn't recovered fully in terms of workforce. A lot of people went to work in other industries and didn't return. Boat dealers went out of business. Some manufacturers went out of business, and so these founder-based companies don't want to go through that again. In fact, may not have the cash to be able to go through that again. So I think there's a little bit of a rush from sellers who want to beat that downturn. As a result of that, there's a lot of discussion, has been the last couple of years, a lot of activities we've seen. Here's the thing, though. We don't know exactly how many companies are in the recreational boating space on the manufacturing side. It's over 1,000 for sure. Everybody concedes that. Whatever the number is, though, it's a big one. And just by doing the math, you have to figure that all of those recent acquisitions I detailed, they've really not appreciably changed the industry. It's still highly fragmented, still dominated by mom and pops, and all it's done really is centralize some of the larger companies. But will it continue? That's something we can talk about as well.
Last question. Do you believe in this consolidation? Will this make room for, to your comment, new or startup manufacturers, which will ultimately break in the boating industry, the marine industry?
Boy, I'd love to think so. As a lifelong boater and fan of the business, I'd love to say yes, but I don't think so. For one, the boating industry is very slow to change. In fact, they're resistant to change in some ways. That's true both on the supplier side and the dealer side. To be a startup boat builder, you have to have a dealer network. That's tough to build. You have to have cash. Unless you're self-funded, it's really difficult to get financing for a new boat building venture, regardless of your track record, either from a bank or private equity. And I want to tell you about a friend of mine. He's a passionate, successful entrepreneur. He started 2 boat manufacturing companies, was the CEO of a third. So he came up with the idea for an innovative new boat in a popular segment, unlike anything on the market. He knows the dealers. He gets 100 pre-orders, has sources lined up, contract manufacturers, everything's good to go. However, guess what? He's sourcing some aluminum from China, and the tariffs hit just as he's ramping up. So suddenly the cost of his raw materials shoot up, his profit margin changes in the process, and he just really struggles. So, you know, he now has quality control issues. That's tough to manage from here in the U.S., even with the Chinese agent helping him. And the whole thing just kind of collapsed before he could really build very many boats. So, you know, everybody's struggling with a qualified, skilled labor force. Everybody, even boat building companies that have been in business for a long time, struggle with capitalization, with cash flow. It's just a really difficult environment for a startup boat builder. So I'd love to say that it's a great environment for startups, but unfortunately the reality is quite different.
Well, David, on behalf of Cherry Bekaert, we want to thank you for joining us today in this first of 3-part series dealing with the marine industry, the boating industry, and really what we see happening from a private equity as well as a merger and acquisition. So thank you.
You're welcome.